one. Hello. This picture here is from the book of the Evangelist, the 12th century Greek manuscript. And I found it here in this book, the Lost Books of the Bible. When I enlarged it for the video, it wasn't very clear, so I had to redraw it, and I added colors to help identify the images. It is called the Baptism of Christ in the River Jordan. John said, "I am, as Isaiah prophesied, a voice that cries in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord." Now what that means, that he was preaching something that was not heard before or well established. The incarnation of the Son of God, and he shows us that by his example. Now John over here is gesturing with his arms. I am not the Christ. I'm the forerunner. I'm the physical body of Jesus before the incarnation. Now, there's some hieroglyphics up here. You see this sign right here? That represents the mind to comprehend. These two men here want to know the meaning of four things said about John in the book of Matthew. The first two, his diet was locusts and wild honey. What that means, he was a student or read the Hebrew scriptures, and that was honey to him. That helped him prepare for the incarnation. Now, two other things that's said in the book of Matthew. He wore a garment of camel's hair. Now, a camel is a tall animal, and the shape of the animal represents you, or John, becoming more spiritual than other people. A camel carries out a mission in the desert without water, sex. And John represents, therefore, a camel. One other thing said, now this is the second thing, or the fourth. He wore a leather girdle about his loins. And that means he was practicing abstinence. And he remained single because that's incompatible with marriage. Now, you can see down here that his foot is on this line. And these two principles here of abstinence and steady help him to understand the law, help him to become more spiritual. First he has to understand the law, then practice it. Now up here is his mother and father. His father is saying, we give John our genes. Now his mother was a descendant of Aaron. His father, a priest in the temple. That's one advantage. The second line represents Jews teach their children the Torah, the tenets of the Torah, the law. And the third thing they do here is they teach their child how to read. So those are three advantages. Now, John not only baptized Jesus, but other people from Jerusalem, Judea, and the regions around the river Jordan. So he was preaching, people came to hear him preach, were not only Jews, but other people too. And it says that also the Pharisees and the Sadducees came to his baptism. And John called them a generation of vipers, but because they thought, because Abraham was their father, they were the chosen people. But that's not enough. Now this man down here represents pre-baptism. See, he's laying down. He doesn't understand these two principles, how John became Jesus. You see this sign here? That represents the body and head of man. And he has his right hand here. You see this band here? He also does not understand the principle of blood sacrifice. And see, he has this garment here around his waist. He also doesn't understand this principle of sex genetics, the sixth principle here of the higher law, because this is his left hand. He doesn't understand that. Now, this second man here, he's nude. This is the first stage of the baptism. He's in the crawl, baby position. He doesn't understand these two principles, how John becomes Jesus, but he wants to learn. That's the first part of the baptism. Now this woman here, being baptized in the Jordan, represents, this is not a cleansing of the physical body. It is a cleansing of your mind and spirit, or soul. See, she's gesturing here with her right arm. She wants to understand these principles of the incarnation represented by this crevice. Now, this man has emerged from the baptism. And he has one leg in this boot here, representing he now understands the higher law. And this sign here in his right hand, he's grasping it, representing you have to grasp the sixth principle power of sex genetics here, which is part of the higher law. Now this second boot here represents, after you learn about the law, the next step here is practicing the law. But you see this question mark here? This boot does not fit everybody. And it's not free. There are benefits, but you have to pay for it. And if you choose not to practice the law, you're not considered no sinner or you're not cursed, because practicing the human law is considered equally important. Because man has to be born physically first before the incarnation occurs. Now this pile of clothing here represents beliefs that he had prior to the baptism that he's now discarded. They're no longer true or valid. Now, when Jesus emerged from the baptism, it says that the heavens opened up and a dove descended, lighting on the head of Jesus, descended from heaven. And that represents the incarnation of the Son, because the Son and the Holy Spirit are one. Now, can John the Baptist, or say a preacher, give you the baptism of the Holy Spirit and fire? No. Because John said that comes from heaven or God only. He can only baptize you with water, the meaning of how to prepare. Now, up here, there's some other signs, hieroglyphics. You see these two men here with halos? In this sign here, they are illuminated by things that John said in the book of John. Now, John the Baptist is not the author of the book of John, but he's quoted there. And it says that Christ must increase and I must decrease, because the transformation of Jesus, John into Jesus, is gradual. It doesn't happen all at once. And something else that he said up here in the book of John, Christ is from heaven. He does not have a physical body. And he says, I'm from the earth. I provide the physical body for the incarnation. Now, we read about Jesus in the New Testament or the four Gospels until he reaches the age of 12. And then he disappears. Nothing is said about him until the baptism. And after the baptism, it says he's about 30 years old when he begins his ministry. Now, this gap in time is filled in by John the Baptist, because he cannot practice the higher law until he reaches the age of sexual maturity. So from puberty to the peak of adulthood is the best time to prepare for the incarnation, because it does take time. It's not all at once. And after this time right here, or your peak of manliness, your chances for this to happen diminish with age. Now, John's made an amazing statement. He says that God can turn these stones into Jews. Now, what does that mean? See this stone here? That's a man that has no knowledge of God, generally referred to as Gentiles. Now, why is that? Because they can't read Hebrew. And the Hebrew Bible is written in Hebrew. Now it's true that it was translated into Greek, called the Septuagint, at this time, but it's unlikely that Jews could not read Greek either. And because the Hebrew Bible was written by hand on parchment or in scrolls, it was not easily accessible. It was not like today where you can buy a book. Now, in the last 2,000 years, Gentiles now can read. And the Bible has been translated in most of the languages of the world. And the Gentiles have their own churches, Christian churches. So there isn't no longer a big difference between Jews and Gentiles now. Now this sign right here, or these two signs, represents God is not going to pick you if you don't have the right genes or the essential elements and you don't think and do the right thing. Now, I'm going to, here it is, explain this halo. The head of Jesus here is hiding part of this cross, but it's formed by 4 intersecting circles here. See these lines? And when you add this 5th circle, you get the cross of Christ. It means the illuminate or of Jesus Christ, because it's man plus Christ. You get the illumination of 4 eyes. Jesus Christ has the illumination of 4 eyes. Now there's a different number of ways of explaining this. These are the 2 physical eyes. They enlighten you about what is happening in the physical world. And your 3rd eye of your mind is the light of your subjective knowledge. So these 3 eyes tell you what to do in life. But this 4th eye can also be considered the 3rd divine eye. And there's another way to explain this. These 2 physical eyes are considered outer consciousness, and the 3rd inner eye as inner consciousness, and Christ being the 3rd eye. So, Jesus Christ is the illumination of 4 eyes. Now you can see that Jesus is making a sign here with his hand. This is this sign right here. These are the 2 eyes, physical. This is your 3rd eye of the mind. And this is the 3rd eye, divine, of the 5th kingdom. That's Christ, the Son of God. Now, you can also count this as the 4th divine eye of man, or of the 5th kingdom. Now, John says something else. He said, when Jesus appears, he shall have in his hand a winnowing fork. That's the power to separate the grains from the chaff, what is true and not true. And the Holy Spirit up here gives him that power. Now, what did I forget? I'm going to go over here to these three angels. See this disc up here? This message regards the third divine eye because these are angels. The third eye here. And this first angel is holding a white robe in her hands, representing the holy robe worn by Jesus, the Messiah, symbolizing purity or holiness. But now just a minute, it changes the way man thinks in his spirit and what he does. Now the second angel is also holding a robe. You see her foot here? The angel wants you to rightly understand this. Because this robe is the same color as the skin of Jesus. When the incarnation of Christ occurs, your physical appearance or your skin does not change. You can't tell the difference between John and Jesus by looking at them. You can only tell the difference by what they say and do. Now you see this sign up here? What they're telling you here is to enlighten your spirit. Now, I'm just checking to see if I got everything here. I'm going to tell you something else. This halo here has a second meaning. See the double line? The two circles? It's this cross here. See these triangular branches, 4 branches? They represent 4 right spirits. These are triangular signs representing spirits, and they're at a 90-degree right angle here. They're all at a right angle. So, what are the 4 right spirits? Well, you can say yes or no to human or carnal genetics, and you can say yes or no to divine genetics, and those are 4 right spirits. Now, John, practicing here the higher law, he's not forced to do this. He does it because he desires. And he thinks he's born for this purpose. A voice crying in the wilderness is somebody also that desires the salvation of God because of his predicament and also for his nation. So he's doing this because he thinks it's the right thing to do for him. Now, these signs here are 2 humps on the back of a camel, and they represent what you do with your genes and what you do with those genes. Now, the River Jordan here at Enon, where there was plenty of water, represents the meaning of the baptism. Now you see up here, this is a double light. What the 4 Gospels say about John, what he said in the 4 Gospels, sheds a light here on the baptism of Jesus by John. But this baptism also has an impact on the world. See, this sign here is the world, the globe. And these 2 men here with halos are illuminated by the picture. And they have their hands in this position, referring to, understanding, and believing how John becomes Jesus. But they're on opposite sides. So one believes, one does not. That's my message for today.